Ever since World at War back in 2008, the greater Call of Duty community looked at its Zombies mode as a smaller and less intrusive alternative to its multiplayer. It was, at the time, a basic PvE mode in which you fight hordes of the undead to make that round number tick up. Throughout the DLC season of World at War, these maps had a constant theme. They would start small and grow over time, not only in scale, but in scope. We started out with Noct, a small, rundown building with a few doors, a box, some wall weapons, and little to no story to be found, only to end up at Der Riese, a rundown facility with multiple buildings, and the majority of them sporting more than one level. We now have perks, pack punch, Easter eggs, and a story to work with. However, whether the community noticed it or not, these maps were getting easier, with the exception of Rooked. Looking back now, this was probably a good thing. After all, the mode didn't really have much to offer outside of seeing how high that round number goes. Making that venture more difficult might allow for certain players to enjoy the game, but you gotta remember, this is still Call of Duty, a massive franchise with some of its highest highs still yet to come. Enter Black Ops 1, a sort of sequel to World at War with our 4 original characters returning to kill more meatbags. Upon arrival, we're met with Kino der Toten, a map that follows the tried and true World at War format we discussed earlier. A slightly bigger map with more rooms to explore, a broader story being told, and well, you guessed it, a pretty easy map. This makes sense now, knowing Kino was supposed to make it into World at War as DLC 4, but ultimately didn't make it due to time constraints. This brings us to 5, a map which at the time was hidden behind the main menu terminal by typing in 3-arc unlock, or unlocked after completing the campaign, similar to how Noct was. For me personally, this map is the true start to Black Ops 1 Zombies, the start of our wacky and almost dreamlike map locations, the start to a truly massive and plot hole ridden story, and most importantly, the start of some truly hard maps. Now, despite being a launch map, in other words, free, it hasn't been remembered or even talked about as much as Kino has. This was the case for me for quite a while, and speaking from experience, this map was hard. Harder than normal. As someone who started out with maps like Kino and Ascension, 5 was a test of skill and endurance, something that I didn't feel I had acquired yet, which made the map much more intense than it needed to be. Which is a shame because 5 genuinely offers so much more in terms of gameplay, replayability, and story. With it being our first experience with Element 115 in the US during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we're greeted with one of the most infamous cast of characters in a Zombies map to date: John F. Kennedy, Robert McNamara, Richard Nixon, and Fidel Castro. All fighting their way through the undead horde in the freaking Pentagon. Listen, I know I've switched red teams recently, but I've never not wanted to tear shit up in the Pentagon. That to me is just pretty astounding, especially for the time. You're tasked with making your way through all 3 levels of the facility, each larger and more complex than the last. The first level, also known as the boardroom, is home to a meeting area decked out with office chairs, secret documents that are too low res to read, and ashtrays galore. Now, this area is special for a few reasons. Immediately, 5 presents itself in a much more distinct way than anything before it. The mystery doesn't stem from broken down and dilapidated architecture because there really is none. What we're faced with is a facility that, at least up until now, has been put to use. Zombies are just starting to break through the windows and walls, whereas in previous maps, those entranceways into the map would have already been boarded up or broken into. We're no longer focusing on just the history of the map's involvement with what's going on, but the future of it as well, and how it may look after the mayhem is over. As you can continue to explore this side hallway, you'll walk right through a metal detector, which is actually a buildable trap that I'll talk more about later. Past this trap, you can find our first perk on the map, Quick Revive. I suggest you buy this first because if you haven't noticed yet, this area isn't the most conventional for training. In earlier maps, tables in the middle of rooms may have already been flipped over to make cover or destroyed in the chaos. Nope. Here we have 2 gigantic meeting tables in a space meant for shaking hands, signing papers, and smoking cigarettes. Essentially, previous map layouts seem to have been inspired by previous entities' actions and effects on the area corresponding to the zombies outbreak. In 5, This mayhem is occurring alongside the player's adventure. This leads the map to be more functional towards a desk-ridden day at the office as opposed to a lived-in zombies apocalypse. However, don't let this take away from the eerie atmosphere on display. Although these design elements are all over this map, they become less intrusive over time and blend in seamlessly with gameplay. Past these tables is the door which leads you to your next area, the hallway. Now, both doors at the end of either table will lead you into this area, but just know, buying one of them will open both. In this hallway, you have another metal detector / future trap, our second perk Speed Cola, and at the very end of the hallway, an elevator, which seems to have been untouched by all of this chaos. You reach level 2, a sort of control center area, also known as the war room. This level is much darker. I don't know why, but for some reason you feel like going back up to the last floor is a better option. Almost as if you've stumbled into secrets that you may just need to take to the grave. After heading down the stairs, it doesn't take long for you to realize that this area is actually just a circle. Sure, you have to remove some barriers, but you've reached round 30 on Keener to Toten just by running in circles. And not only do you spot Mule Kick to the right, but Jug as well. I should mention that Mule Kick only shows up if you have the Resurrection DLC, which includes Moon and the 4 original maps from World at War. But unfortunately, without the power on, this level is almost useless, so you venture off to the other side and find the cargo elevator. Compared to the last one, this elevator has seen some shit. With a spawn window placed at the back and one right outside the front, this one wasn't meant for camping either, so you take it for a ride. You travel down and the doors open. On a window? That can't be right. But before you can even think, you're turned around, looming down a beaten and battered hallway, almost tunnel visioned. With the spawn window behind you in mind, again, this area is not meant for camping. You're forced to venture into the basement, also known as the lab area. The lab area is filled with many things, but the most important, the power switch. You think, this'll lighten the mood, right? Wrong. It's almost as if Treyarch was able to add a layer of fog to the area without actually adding fog. You thought this area would make much more sense after just turning the power on, but just because the area is more lively now doesn't mean you're safe. Before you continue exploring, you hear a familiar sound. It's an enemy, but not a normal zombie. As you turn the corner, the foggy green gas floods your vision as you take it out. That's right. Crawlers are back. There may not be a problem with so few of them now, but you know just how dangerous they can be in larger numbers. You keep moving. In this area there are 3 rooms, each with their own little Easter eggs and secrets. The first one we'll talk about is the weapon testing room, located to the left as soon as you exit the cargo elevator. In here you can find a wall buy for the Bowie knife on the chalkboard, as well as a bunch of inactive weapons such as the death machine up here on this top shelf. The thunder gun can also be found on this cabinet here, and the Winter's Howl can be seen here, deconstructed on this table just to the left of the thunder gun. The Winter's Howl is also the wonder weapon for this map, but we'll talk about that a little later. I should mention that this is not the last weapon we see being constructed on this map. If you head over to this window just outside of the weapons lab, you may have to no-clip in order to see this, but it's actually the ray gun being worked on in its own separate room. The next area in the basement is the testing room located to the right of the power room. Upon entering, you're treated with a squealing pig suspended from the ceiling. Some may have compassion for this helpless animal and leave it be. Others may simply find it annoying and kill it. You can do both. There's no real consequence of keeping it alive or shooting it, just your own sense of moral dread if you think you made the wrong decision. And the final room can be found towards the back, called the small lab room. In here you can see a corpse being operated on in the center table, as well as some bodies hanging out of a few tubes. Now I don't think that these are zombies or Nova crawlers, maybe just people who have been infected with the zombie outbreak and have been put on ice to do further research. However, this isn't really explained to us. This whole lab area screams psych ward meets morgue. Curtains everywhere, the walls tiled in an old rundown green and what we can only assume to be blood splattered white ceramic, as well as a bunch of these containers that we saw back in Kino. This area, more than any, holds the most secrets. You soon realize that, hey, I have the power on and I could have swore I saw Juggernog just one level above me. You head up through a lucky teleporter, grab jug, and now you're working on opening up this area. Only this time, you don't get the normal round changing sound. It's more ominous. A voice rings out and says,
"Warning. Breach detected on level 3. Initiate security protocol 115.
Yeah, we're fucked. You see a man in a doctor's coat exit the portal in sort of a shuffle. You know Call of Duty doesn't provide you with allies. The only other option? Kill it. However, without something powerful enough to take him down, he eventually reaches you. Your mind is racing, a million questions a minute hit you, only to realize he's not trying to kill you. No, he just took your weapon. It's off to the races. If you're fortunate enough to grab another weapon, there's a chance you can still kill him, but trust me, after he runs through that third portal, he is a bitch to catch. If you kill him, he gives you a max ammo and your gun back, as well as a fire sale. If not, he takes your weapon and leaves you with a max ammo, but if you kill him before he even gets to you, he gives you a max ammo and the first ever new drop to zombies, the bonfire sale. The bonfire sale immediately puts you at DEFCON level 5 and makes pack-a-punching only 1,000 points instead of the normal 5,000. You may have noticed I mentioned something about DEFCON level 5. What do I mean by this? Well, in the war room, after you turn on power, you will be able to flip 4 switches around this area. 2 on the catwalk up top, and 2 on the lower level with the teleporter. Every switch will prompt the announcer to, well, announce your DEFCON level. After this, you can run into the teleporter in the center of the room and teleport into Pack-a-Punch. You know, every time I play this map, I forget just how interesting opening Pack-a-Punch is, despite how mundane the process may be. If you hadn't noticed already, the Pack-a-Punch room is the same room that we see our 4 characters in the opening cutscene. Once you enter the Pack-a-Punch room, the DEFCON level will start to count down back to DEFCON 1. During this time, the exit will be closed and zombies will only spawn outside of this room. This lasts for about 30 seconds, but once those doors open, zombies can start to spawn in the 2 windows in the room, and if you don't leave fast enough during the middle of the round, you can easily get stuck here. And that is essentially your regular game of 5. But make no mistake, 5 is home to some of the tightest and intense gameplay we've seen from a zombies map outside of Verrückt. The majority of your time in this map will be spent checking your corners, running around the bottom area of the war room, and spinning the box for a ray gun and the Now the Winter's Howl is really unique and interesting, just like every other winter weapon that's found in Black Ops 1. For starters, the Winter's Howl can also be referred to as Project Skadi, or Skady. It's up on screen now. This is in reference to the Scout, also on screen right now, or the Norse goddess of winter. Once you're able to get this out of the mystery box, you'll be greeted with 6 blasts in the cylinder and 24 in reserves. When Pack-a-Punch, this thing becomes the Winter's Fury with a total of 9 shots in the magazine and 36 in reserves. Now, this weapon can kill zombies, but you'll soon find out that it's not a zombies killing weapon. Let me explain. Every time you shoot the Winter's Howl, a burst of cold air will be expelled and every zombie affected will begin to slow down. You can then shoot them again to freeze them. In the later rounds, the zombies do become a bit more tanky, so you will have to use a few more shots in order to freeze them. Now, if the zombies are low enough health, they will die, but most of the time, they just freeze over, allowing you to tear into them without worrying about them moving. Side note, this is also great for taking out the crawlers. Not only does it freeze them, but it can also kill them without leaving behind any of that terrible green gas. I think it looks great. Whenever we get a one-handed wonder weapon, I'd love to see how much power they can pack into such a little body. But if I'm being honest, this thing isn't really good past like round 30, so it's not top tier, I have to say. Even when slowing down the zombies, it doesn't do much, and if you're trying to get to round 50, I would only carry this thing if you know you can get ammo for your ray gun. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning the box over and over and over and over again for these same weapons, so keep that in mind. Now, in those earlier rounds, when it is putting out a significant amount of damage, at least enough to kill or hurt zombies, it actually does pretty well against the Nova Crawlers and the Yeah, we're gonna talk about him again. The Pentagon Thief is a character we come to know later as Yuri Zavoyski. Zavoyski, along with his associate Gersh, who we will talk about more in later episodes of this series, worked for the Ascension Group, a Soviet Union spin-off of Group 935. While working for Ascension, Yuri and Gersh began researching for a new device titled Project Mercury, which we will later come to know as the Gersh device, which can be found on both Moon and Ascension. During Yuri's studies, he had become corrupted, similar to our old pal Dr. Richtofen. Gersh eventually takes notice, halting all progress on the project. Yuri eventually starts hearing the voice of Samantha after reading Richtofen's journal and continues Project Mercury without Gersh. After completion, Yuri, mad with power, uses the device on Gersh, trapping him and sending Yuri to the Pentagon. Oh yeah, he's also the one who releases the zombies here too. We later found out that the outbreak of the Pentagon actually eventually ends. Authorities are able to put Yuri into custody under the codename Ident K642. As the boss zombie for this map, he's often compared to the dog rounds of previous maps with some clear differences. First of all, it's just him. No zombies, no dogs, no crawlers, just the main man himself. Like I previously mentioned, his goal is not to kill you, but to take whatever weapon you're holding. Oftentimes, the Pentagon Thief is more annoying than anything, and if he ends up catching you, it's almost always harder to kill him after he starts running away, simply due to how fast he is. Despite his annoyance in-game, the Pentagon Thief is one of the coolest and most interesting bosses we've seen in zombies so far. Plus, he gives a discount on the Boom Boom machine. As we all know already, Treyarch loves placing story elements in their maps for players to find and figure out on their own. Whether that be in the form of a new wonder weapon, boss zombie, or music Easter egg, they usually never disappoint, especially when it comes to 5. I may not be able to cover all of the Easter eggs around the map just because there's so many, but if I don't mention your favorite one, please let me know down in the comments below. I would personally love to know myself because I've just grown so fond of this map over the course of reviewing it. So make sure you drop that comment below. Now, the first one we'll be talking about is the music Easter egg. In order to do this, you'll need to go to each of these 3 red landlines around the map and interact with them. The first one can be found on the first level next to Quick Revive. It'll be directly to the left on this side table. The next red phone will be in the middle of the lab area, right in front of the power switch on this cabinet. And the last phone will be right here in the Pack-a-Punch room, across from the meeting table. Not only do you get to listen to Won't Back Down from Eminem's album Recovery, released in 2010, which I won't play here for obvious reasons, but you also get to interact with these red phones. It's actually a lot cooler than it sounds. I'll explain. These phones all share a direct line to the next map in the series, Ascension. On Ascension, you can interact with another set of 3 red phones placed around the map. This will activate a quote from one of the 4 main characters in 5, Fidel, JFK, McNamara, and Nixon. This was changed in BL3's remaster of Ascension, but again, we'll save that for the next video in this series. Now, initially this didn't make much sense to a lot of people. At the time, we didn't know the Pentagon Thief was Yuri. We now know that during the time Yuri had continued Project Mercury, he had recruited scientists from the Pentagon to help him further his research. In summary, the direct line from 5 to Ascension is a nice little touch and adds a lot of world building and universe connecting that Treyarch really leans into in the later maps. I have a sudden urge to rank these as we go along, so I'm gonna give the red phones a 3 out of 5 Pentagon Thief goggles, and I guess we'll throw out the Pentagon Thief himself just because he's so interesting. 5 out of 5 goggles. Now, the next Easter egg we'll talk about is one that I've already mentioned before, but it's located in the weapons testing room in the lab area and in this window next to this teleporter. In weapons lab, you can find a deconstructed Winter's Howl, Thundergun, and Death Machine, and in the room beside it, a deconstructed ray gun. We know that all but one of these weapons is actually usable in the map. The ray gun and the Winter's Howl can be found in the box, and the Death Machine is a power-up. However, the Thundergun is nowhere to be seen other than in this room. So, how did it get here? Well, after World War II, the US and Soviet Union gained control of Germany. During the exploration of the Nazi facilities such as Kino der Toten and Der Ries, these weapons, along with the blueprints for the teleporters and Richtofen's journal, were discovered. The weapons, as well as many scientists from Germany at the time, were brought back to the States to continue their research and experimentation. It's pretty cool to see such a significant tie-in to the rest of the zombie storyline in just one room. This room alone was so cool when I was a kid, and unfortunately I'm an adult now and I can suck the life out of anything, and this room just reminds me that I'll never be able to use the Thundergun on 5. 3 out of 5 goggles, man. What the fuck, dude? And finally, A picture of Richtofen can be found in the hallways just outside the panic room. This was later explained in a cipher found in the remake, Classified, as part of a deal that Richtofen had with the Americans. It's something that kept the community wondering for years and was later explained as just a boss-ass move by Richtofen, so 5 out of 5 goggles. And we finally come back to the previously mentioned trap. Now, this thing, along with the crossbow, is what allows for some insane high rounds, upwards of 229, which kind of brings my earlier statement into question. Is this really the tryhard's dream I made it out to be? Yes and no. For someone unfamiliar with the 2-hit system of old, or you just haven't played Black Ops 1 in a while, it may feel weird and cramped. Sure, you start out slow, but the pace violently picks up. But after a certain point, you're cruising. Now that cruise only lasts until about round 50, and that's usually the most amount of time any normal person would spend on Black Ops 1 these days. 50 is a respectable round, but anything beyond that requires not just precision and skill, but time as well. The livestream you're seeing on screen now is a showcase of a fraction of gameplay from Yeezy's world record run, where he reaches round 229 and crashes. Now, take note, this live stream begins as he starts round 227 and ends shortly after he crashes around the 2 hour and 15 minute mark. But in the left hand corner, however, you'll see he's been playing for just over 70 hours. Apparently it's like this for all Black Ops 1 maps due to them resetting after a certain amount of time. If you want a better, more in-depth description of how this run was achieved, I've linked Johnny J25's video on the subject below. His video is very informative, take it for someone who watched it when it came out, as well as Yeezy's world record stream. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm almost 99% sure that I will never get anywhere close to this round in a Black Ops 1 map, let alone any other Call of Duty Zombies map. So the fact that someone got to 229 alone is ridiculous. But as we mentioned, 5 is a small, tight map with a high round strategy that requires an even tighter training pattern. There are even different strategies which spawn from that one, which are more difficult but do yield faster times. All this to say that 5 is one of the hardest, most rewarding maps we've seen from an early Zombies game. The map starts slow and builds intrigue. As the rounds progress, so does the difficulty. Momentum builds fast and carries you through the many floors of the building. Each is more interesting than the last. You may not be able to stop and smell the roses the first time around, but you can always come back with a higher confidence in the ability to check out the interesting Easter eggs and story bits throughout. It wasn't until today, June 23rd, 2021, when I finished the script, that I found out the outbreak at 5 kind of just ends. And from this spawned a group known as the Broken Arrow, who continues the Pentagon's research on Element 115. Yes, it took an outbreak at the Pentagon to make the government realize this might be something we need to take care of in the future. And in a way that kind of symbolizes Treyarch's thought process while creating this map as well. You've got to remember, in the early days of World at War, there was almost no storyline. We were American soldiers delivering cargo and crash landed in an unfortunate situation. It took the community to go out on a limb and ask the question if one of the zombies noises in the game was supposed to be Sam, and what that meant. Sure, Treyarch started and carried somewhat of a story after Shinonuma, but it wasn't until 5 when they really started to think, what can this story be, instead of what it already is. You know, looking back, I never even mentioned the spontaneity of the teleporters where, you know, you could jump into one and jump out of one and you'll never know where you're actually going to end up. And because there's no skybox for the map, there's no light from the mystery box shining up. Instead, there are these TVs placed over the mystery boxes that show you exactly where the mystery box is. Again, all unique details that, for me personally, add to the replayability of this map. And for those reasons, I appreciate 5. I hold it close as a symbol of when simpler times were starting to get more complex. How Zombies is a connected universe instead of contained stories. How some of the most intriguing map ideas can breed some of the most difficult and rewarding map layouts. So, Here's to 5. A never-ending joyride of close calls and endless lore. And for that, we thank you. I didn't plan this. It's fucking blue and it's a chug jug, bro. It's a chug jug.